Hello family, enjoy this relaxing moment with Charm Stories. Remember to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comment section. Also generously hit the like button cause it means the world to us. Please sit back, relax and enjoy as we dive into the story. Maya's fingers trembled slightly as she wove the final strips of reed into the small basket she intended to sell at the local market. The cramped wooden shed attached to the side of their tiny home offered little protection from the cold, but it was all she had ever known. Rain dripped through holes in the roof, forming muddy puddles on the floor. Her senses were sharp. She could feel the damp chill biting into her skin, smell the faint mold growing on the old wooden beams, and hear each drop of water hitting the ground. She placed the finished basket alongside the others she had spent the past week creating. Each was carefully made by touch, the pattern memorized in her mind. The dim light of dawn filtered through a cracked window, allowing her a vague sense of time. Though she was blind, she had learned to gauge day and night by the warmth of the sunlight or the cool of the breeze. A violent coughing fit startled her from her thoughts. Grandma Esther's voice, raspy and frail, carried through the thin wall that separated them. Maya's heart clenched in worry. Medicine was expensive, and they could barely afford food. If Grandma's health continued to decline, she feared she might lose the only family she had ever known. She stood slowly, sliding her cane along the ground to make sure she didn't trip over any loose boards. At 18, Maya had long grown accustomed to navigating the world without sight. Her hearing compensated where her eyes did not, and she had become adept at reading subtle changes in sound to avoid obstacles. But the city streets were another challenge entirely. Cars, buses, and crowds of people made it a perilous place for someone like her. Slipping inside the house, she found Grandma Esther lying on a thin mattress. The old woman's voice cracked. "Child, are you heading out to sell the baskets now?" "Yes, Grandma," Maya said softly. She pressed a gentle hand to the older woman's forehead, feeling for fever. "I'll try to sell them for a good price. Then I'll buy the medicine you need." Grandma Esther tried to protest, but her voice was too weak. "Don't spend too much, Maya. We still need food. And the landlord was here yesterday, demanding rent." Maya's heart tightened. "I'll manage," she murmured, forcing a reassuring smile. "I promise." She slung the makeshift sack of baskets over her shoulder and carefully stepped outside. The early morning chill grazed her cheeks, and she took a deep breath. The world beyond their little home had always been hostile, but she refused to give in to despair. She needed to make enough money to keep them alive, and maybe, one day, find out who she really was and why she had been abandoned at birth. As she made her way along the worn footpath, she vowed silently, "I will get Grandma the medicine she deserves. I won't let this blindness stop me." She squared her shoulders, cane tapping rhythmically against the ground, leading her toward the uncertain day ahead. Darian Cole stared at the city skyline from the floor-to-ceiling windows of his opulent office. Streams of gray morning light illuminated the chic minimalist decor. Everything in the room exuded wealth. Polished marble floors, modern art on the walls, and plush leather seats for high-stake negotiations. He sipped an expensive espresso without tasting it. His mind was elsewhere. A stack of documents lay on his desk, all containing dire news for employees about to be laid off. The company's profits were declining in one division, and Darian, the ruthless billionaire CEO, had decided it was more efficient to let 100 employees go than keep them on the payroll. His assistant, Mark, stood nervously near the desk. "Sir, the employees, they've been informed about their termination this morning. A few have requested an appeal, hardship cases, medical needs, single parents." Darian lifted his gaze from the documents. "And?" Mark hesitated. "I thought perhaps we could reconsider a fraction of them." "I'm not running a charity," Darian interrupted in a clipped tone. "These employees are dead weight. If they're not generating profit, they're out. Simple as that." He rose from his high-backed chair, shrugging on a tailored suit jacket. His reflection stared back from the window, a handsome man in his late 20s, with cold gray eyes and an air of unshakable confidence. For Darian Cole, emotions were liabilities. He'd learned that the hard way while growing up under a father who valued money above all else. If it didn't make dollars, it didn't make sense. "Sir," Mark began, There's also the matter of the corporate social responsibility event tonight. I'm aware, Darian snapped. Arrange for my driver to be ready at 6. Vanessa wants me at some gala. I have no time for these petty details. Mark bowed his head. Understood, Mr. Cole. Vanessa Monroe, Damien's fiancée, had already texted him 3 times that morning, reminding him to attend the event. He checked his phone once more, rolling his eyes at her latest message. Don't be late, darling. The press wants photos of us. Vanessa, remember, we're the power couple. My dress alone costs a fortune. See you at 8. Hugs and kisses. Darian ignored the pang of annoyance rising in his chest. His personal life, if it could be called that, was dictated by appearances and business alliances. Love was not something he believed in. Not anymore. He strode out of the office, cool and composed, completely unaware that by the end of the night, his entire world would be flipped upside down by a single encounter with someone he deemed insignificant. That evening, the city was blanketed by a torrential downpour. Maya huddled under a dilapidated bus stop shelter, the strong wind blowing sheets of rain onto her. The meager amount she'd earned from selling baskets had bought Grandma Esther a few pills, but nowhere near enough for ongoing treatment. Her own clothes were soaked, and she could feel water seeping into her worn-out shoes. She decided to take a shortcut through a lesser-traveled street, hoping to reach home sooner and avoid the congested main road. Her cane tapped against the pavement, each step measured and cautious. 1 foot in front of the other, Maya. You can't afford a single misstep. She repeated this like a mantra. At that exact moment, Darian Cole's sleek luxury sports car tore through the rain. He was running late for the gala, Vanessa's impatient texts clogging his phone. Splashes of water arced from the speeding tires as he navigated streets lit only by the occasional, flickering street lamp. Vanessa sat beside him, checking her lipstick in the visor mirror. Can't you go any faster? We're late, she whined. Damien's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. The roads are flooded. I'm doing the best I can. She huffed dramatically, snapping her compact mirror shut. If we miss the red carpet photos, this whole look is wasted. Darian said nothing, focusing on the slick road ahead. His frustration simmered. He was about to fire back a retort when he noticed a figure crossing the street. The person moved slowly, cane in hand, clearly someone who couldn't see. He slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. The car skidded on the wet asphalt. Maya heard the screech of tires but had no time to react. The monstrous force of impact lifted her off her feet, sending her crashing onto the hood of the car before tumbling onto the drenched pavement. Her basket scattered across the road, the sound of splintering reeds echoing in the night. Damien's heart lurched into his throat as the car finally stopped. The headlights shone on the motionless form of a young woman lying face down in a puddle. Rain pounded her lifeless figure, dark hair spread around her like a broken halo. Vanessa let out a shrill scream. Darian, what did you do? For a moment, Darian sat paralyzed, staring at the girl's unmoving body. Then instinct kicked in. He flung open the car door, stepping into the lashing rain. But fear and apprehension seized him. He, Darian Cole, with so much to lose, couldn't afford a scandal or a lawsuit. Yet seeing the girl's fragile form struck a chord he didn't know he still had. Vanessa rushed after him, high heels sinking into the growing puddles. We need to leave, she exclaimed, her voice high-pitched with panic. If the media finds out you hit someone, your reputation will be destroyed. You'll be swarmed with lawsuits. Go, Darian. He stared at Maya's body, debating whether to call an ambulance. His mind spun with catastrophic headlines. Billionaire CEO in fatal hit-and-run. The thought terrified him more than the moral implications of leaving a bleeding girl on the ground. The thunder roared overhead, and Vanessa tugged at his arm. We can't stay. She's probably already dead. Don't say that, Darian snapped, voice shaking. In that moment of indecision, the side of him that had always been taught to protect his assets over everything else won out. I can't ruin everything I've built. Not like this. He turned away. Sliding back into the driver's seat, he gunned the engine. Vanessa quickly joined him, slamming the door shut. The car sped away, splashing more water across Maya's prone figure. Damian's chest tightened with guilt, but fear wrestled it into submission. He would spend the rest of the night trying to convince himself he had done the only thing possible. Maya lay face down on the wet asphalt, her consciousness drifting in and out. Pain shot through her body like lightning, and the taste of copper filled her mouth. With her heightened senses, she could hear the distant roar of the sports car's engine fading into the darkness. Nobody was there to help her. Time seemed to slow, and all she could think about was Grandma Esther, how she'd promised to return home. A tear, indistinguishable from the rain, slipped down her cheek. "I can't die here," she thought desperately. "I need to get back to Grandma." Then, as if from nowhere, footsteps approached through the pouring rain. She felt gentle hands lifting her, and a warm voice spoke near her ear. "Hold on, you're going to be okay." That was the last thing she registered before the darkness claimed her completely. Lucas Grant had been on his way home when he saw the horrifying scene. A girl lying motionless on the wet street, no sign of the driver who had hit her. Without hesitation, he'd rushed to her side, scooping her up in his arms and calling for an ambulance. At the hospital, bright fluorescent lights and the whirl of gurney wheels greeted him. Nurses and doctors descended on Maya's limp form, hooking her up to 4 lines, assessing her injuries. Lucas, soaked to the bone, watched them disappear through double doors, his heart pounding. He didn't even know her name. He paced the hallway for hours, ignoring the stares from the few patients and medical staff who passed by. Something compelled him to stay, some connection he couldn't explain. When a doctor finally emerged, the verdict was cautious. The girl had sustained a severe head injury, multiple fractures, and blood loss, but she was alive. Relieved, Lucas left his contact information with the front desk, instructing them to call him if anything changed. He couldn't abandon her. Despite never having met her before, he felt an odd sense of responsibility. Perhaps it was his background as a lawyer. He'd always been driven to help those in need. Or maybe it was something deeper, something intuitive telling him this girl's life was intertwined with his in ways he didn't yet understand. Back in his penthouse, Damian tossed and turned all night. The towering windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights, but he felt suffocated. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the girl's form crumpled in the street. Vanessa lay asleep next to him in the king-sized bed, her breathing soft and even. He envied her ability to rest so easily, as if nothing had happened. When she'd insisted he leave the scene, she'd made it sound like the only logical decision. Maybe it was, he tried to convince himself. It was an accident. And she shouldn't have been in the street during a storm. But the old, neglected part of his conscience wouldn't let it go. He remembered being a child, after his mother died, he'd been in the care of a father who saw him as an inconvenience. That feeling of being unwanted, cast aside without mercy, still clung to him. Is that what I did to her? His phone buzzed on the nightstand, startling him. He grabbed it, expecting another text from Vanessa. Instead, it was a late-night email from his lawyer, Lucas Grant, about an upcoming contract negotiation. Normally, Damian was all business, even at 3 in the morning. But tonight, the weight on his chest was too much to ignore. He closed the email without reading it, set the phone down, and stared at the ceiling, racked by an unfamiliar emotion, regret. Several days passed, and Maya remained in the hospital under observation. Lucas visited often, bringing flowers or small comforts, a soft blanket, a gentle music box. He would sit by her bed, reading articles on his phone or preparing case files while waiting for her to wake. Early one morning, her eyes fluttered open. She was disoriented, the world around her an unfamiliar blur of sterile white walls and the beeping of machines. Confusion set in, her head throbbed, her arms and legs felt heavy. Lucas leaned in. "Hey, you're awake," he said softly. "I'm Lucas Grant. I'm the one who brought you here." Maya parted her dry lips. Where? Grandma? "I need to get home," she managed, her voice hoarse. The mention of a grandma piqued Lucas's curiosity. "You had no ID on you," he explained. "I didn't know whom to contact. Can you tell me your name?" "Amaya," she whispered, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. She tried to see him, but her vision was murky. "I can't," see properly right now. I've been blind since birth, but everything feels even darker. Lucas gently took her hand. Maya, you're safe here. Let me help you. We can try to find your grandmother. Do you remember where you live? She nodded, giving him sparse details. The doctor said she'd need significant recovery time, and bills were piling up. As a lawyer with plenty of investigative resources, Lucas dug into Maya's past for any possible leads. What he discovered was astonishing. Records indicating that Maya was, in fact, the granddaughter of Charles Harris, a powerful businessman who had vanished under suspicious circumstances years ago. The story was all over old newspapers. Charles Harris's daughter disappeared with her infant child, rumored to be on the run from menacing business rivals. No conclusion was ever found. Lucas felt a wave of shock as he pieced the details together. Was it just a bizarre coincidence? Could this vulnerable blind girl truly be connected to a wealthy dynasty? If so, her entire life had been a lie. Maya's existence was far from ordinary, and the knowledge of her hidden heritage could change everything. The soft click of shoes on the hospital floor heralded Lucas's arrival at Maya's bedside. He pulled up a plastic chair and gently set a paper bag of warm bread on the nightstand. The past few days had been a whirlwind, balancing his work as a lawyer while discreetly digging deeper into Maya's background. Maya turned her head toward him, her bandaged arm lying atop a thin hospital blanket. "Lucas?" she asked tentatively. "Is that you?" He smiled, though he knew she couldn't see it. "Yes, it's me. I brought you something to eat. How are you feeling?" She took a moment before answering. "The pain is better, but the doctors told me I might need surgery if my injuries don't heal properly. I can't afford it." Her voice shook slightly. Lucas exhaled, steeling himself. "Maya, your bills are already high. The hospital is demanding some form of payment, or they'll discharge you prematurely." Fear flashed across her delicate features. "I have nowhere else to go. My grandma is sick, and we barely have money for food. They can't just throw me out." Lucas reached over to steady her trembling hand. "I won't let them," he said, voice firm. "I promise." Though she didn't know him well, Maya sensed sincerity in his voice. She felt a silent gratitude that someone, for once, was in her corner. "Thank you," she whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. Privately, Lucas considered approaching charitable foundations or pulling strings to keep her in the hospital. But something else weighed on his mind, the extraordinary possibility that she might be the heir to an empire. Could he use that angle to secure better treatment for her? Or would stirring up that kind of revelation invite trouble? Deciding to tread carefully, he rose to speak with the billing department once again. He vowed to protect this girl. Her past was complicated, and she was in no position to fight alone. For reasons he couldn't fully explain, he needed to see justice done. Darian Cole was used to living in damage control mode. Something was always threatening his empire. A new scandal, a financial shortfall, or an aggressive competitor. But a lawsuit for a hit and run? That was new territory, and it terrified him. His legal team had informed him that someone had been found severely injured in the exact location and time of his accident. Eyewitnesses claimed a luxury sports car was involved. Rumors were spreading, and the victim had pressed charges, though the official complaint was filed under the guidance of a certain Lucas Grant. "This Lucas Grant," Darian said, flipping through the documents in his office. "Isn't he?" Mark cleared his throat. "Yes, sir, he's the lawyer you consult for certain corporate matters. Apparently, he's taken this case pro bono. The victim is a blind girl named Maya." Damien's gut twisted. So she survived. He cursed silently, remembering that haunting scene. He tried to push it out of his mind, but now it was back with a vengeance. If word got out, his reputation would be in shambles, and he'd likely face jail time for fleeing the scene. He decided to handle it quietly. "Arrange a meeting," he ordered. "I'll do what it takes to make this go away." 2 days later, Darian walked into a small conference room at a private legal office. His heart pounded as he spotted the young woman seated at the table. Maya wore oversized sunglasses, her injuries hidden beneath bandages on her arms. She turned her head in his direction, unseeing eyes faintly catching the light. She had no idea he was the man responsible for her pain. Lucas introduced them coldly. Damian Cole, this is Maya. She's the victim you've been reading about. Maya lifted her chin, trying to place the voice. So you're the CEO who wants to settle with me? She asked, her tone guarded. Damian swallowed. Yes. I heard about your accident, he lied smoothly, and I want to help. There was an uneasy pause. Maya had an uncanny ability to read emotions through voices, something honed by years of blindness. She sensed a certain tension in Damian, a flicker of guilt perhaps, but she couldn't pinpoint its origin. Lucas cleared his throat. We're here to discuss the medical bills and potential compensation. Maya is in need of urgent surgery to improve her mobility and repair internal damage. There's also the matter of her lost income. She used to make a living selling baskets. Damian nodded stiffly, trying to hide the turmoil churning in his stomach. We can arrange for top-notch medical care. In return, I'd like to reach an out-of-court settlement. Lucas's eyes narrowed, his distrust evident. That means you want her to drop the lawsuit. Maya shifted in her seat. I'm only here because I need help paying my bills. I have no desire to fight a giant corporation in court. Damian forced a polite smile. Then we have an understanding. Yet beneath that veneer of politeness, a storm brewed. Maya still had no idea she was talking to the man who had nearly killed her, and left her there to die. Damian finalized an agreement that covered Maya's hospital bills and ongoing medical expenses. Part of the deal included a specialized surgical procedure that could potentially help restore partial vision, an unprecedented chance for someone born blind. The doctors had found that, under the right conditions, there might be a possibility of improving her sight. When Lucas explained this to Maya, she was stunned. Eye surgery? I've been told all my life it was impossible, she murmured, fingers twisting in her lap. Why would a CEO like Damian Cole offer something like that out of the blue? Lucas, cautious, replied, He claims it's a charitable gesture. But I suspect he's doing it to avoid public scrutiny and more severe legal consequences. Regardless, it could change your life, Maya. Maya felt a swirl of emotion, gratitude at the opportunity, suspicion at Damian's motives, and overwhelming hope at the idea of finally being able to see. If there was even a sliver of a chance that she could open her eyes and perceive the world around her, she couldn't refuse. The next day, they met again to sign the necessary paperwork. Thank you, she said quietly to Damian, for giving me this chance. Damian, struggling to keep his composure, responded, I just want to make things right. The words tasted bitter on his tongue. If only she knew I'm the one responsible. As they shook hands, an odd sensation passed between them. Maya's ability to sense emotional undercurrents made her uneasy. Something about Damian's voice carried an edge of regret that seemed far too personal for a distant benefactor. Still, she didn't question it. After a lifetime of hardship, sometimes the best course was to accept help with grace, even if it came with invisible strings attached. Vanessa Monroe was livid. She stormed into Damian's penthouse, her designer heels clicking furiously on the marble floors. You're spending how much on that nobody? She screeched, tossing her luxury purse onto a nearby couch. This is ridiculous. Damian draped his jacket on a chair. He was exhausted. It's a corporate settlement, he lied. If we don't pay up, we'll face a scandal and possibly jail time for negligence. Vanessa crossed her arms. All this fuss for a blind girl? Why can't she just take some money and disappear? His expression darkened. Vanessa, I already told you, if we don't do something drastic, we risk a huge public relations nightmare. Besides, don't pretend you care about the cost. It's my money. She pursed her lips, annoyance radiating off her in waves. In truth, she did care about the cost. She wanted every cent for herself. The idea that Damian was lavishing medical treatments on some poor nobody enraged her. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Maya began noticing her uncanny ability to read people's voices more intensely than ever. Nurses who spoke kindly yet carried hidden stress, doctors who promised compassion yet subtly angled for higher fees. She felt the intangible weight of people's intentions pressing on her. When Lucas visited, she shared her growing concern. "I can't see faces, obviously, but I sense something in Damian's voice, like he's more involved than he's letting on. Or maybe I'm imagining it." Lucas hesitated, caught between wanting to expose the truth and not wanting to destroy the chance for her life-changing surgery. "Damian Cole is a complicated man," he said diplomatically. "I'd advise caution. Don't trust him completely." Maya nodded. Her entire life had taught her caution anyway. Maya's recovery required her to temporarily move into a private care facility arranged by Damian's company. It was a spacious suite in a specialized medical rehabilitation center. Nurses came and went, assisting her with daily activities. Underneath her bandages, bruises healed slowly, but the real game-changer was the scheduled eye surgery. Late one night, thirst drove her to wander the corridors in search of a nurse. She tapped her cane quietly along the polished floor. As she passed one room, she paused at the sound of a familiar voice. Damian was inside, speaking on the phone. The tone of his voice was low, haunted. "I'm paying for her surgery," he said, "but it's only because I can't live with the guilt. I see her face every time I close my eyes. I can't do this anymore." Maya's heart pounded. Guilt? Why does he feel guilty? He continued, "I still blame myself for what happened when I was a kid. I promised I'd never let someone else suffer because of me." A silence stretched. Then Damian added, almost whispering, "I lost my mother when I was 8 because my father refused her medical treatment. He said it was a bad investment. Now, here I am, about to do the same if I walk away from this girl." A wave of emotions hit Maya. She stepped back, leaning against the wall. So Damian's seemingly distant, cold demeanor might have deeper roots. She could hear the tremor in his voice, the raw edge of trauma. She had stumbled upon a part of Damian that no one else saw, a man fighting ghosts from his past. Intrigued and slightly comforted, Maya returned to her room with a head full of questions. Perhaps he's not just a heartless billionaire. Perhaps there's more to him. Something painfully human, something broken. Across town, in the sleek offices of Cole Industries, another drama unfolded. Ethan Cole, Damian's half-brother, had been plotting for months. He had felt overshadowed his entire life. Damian was the favored son, the legitimate heir who inherited the bulk of their father's fortune. Ethan had always seethed in the background, hungry for a piece of the empire he believed was rightfully his. With Vanessa's help, Ethan orchestrated a scheme to frame Damian for financial fraud. He forged documents, rerouted funds, and manipulated digital records, making it appear as though Damian was embezzling company money. Vanessa, fueled by her own greed, happily played the role of confidant, passing along insider information she gleaned from Damian. One afternoon, the board of directors confronted Damian with the evidence. Fraudulent emails from his account, unauthorized wire transfers, and suspicious accounting irregularities. Damian was blindsided. He had no explanation. The board froze his assets and stripped him of his position pending a formal investigation. Ethan stepped forward, feigning concern. "Damian, how could you? You've risked everything our father built. I had no choice but to bring this to the board's attention." Shocked and furious, Damian snapped, "I have no idea how this happened. You're behind this, aren't you, Ethan?" Ethan raised his hands in mock surrender. "You think I'm jealous of you? That's absurd." But Damian saw the smug gleam in Ethan's eyes. In one fell swoop, Ethan had accomplished what he'd always wanted, Damian's downfall. Outside the boardroom, Vanessa stood quietly, arms folded, a satisfied smirk playing on her lips. She planned to keep Damian in the dark until the final blow was delivered. Soon, she would switch her allegiance to Ethan, the new rising power in Cole Industries. Completely unaware of the chaos erupting in Damian's life, Maya prepared mentally and physically for the eye surgery. The lead surgeon explained the risks and possibilities. "We have to repair damage caused by the accident. With your congenital blindness, this procedure might restore partial or even full vision, but there are no guarantees." Maya swallowed hard. The idea of seeing for the first time both thrilled and terrified her. She could hardly imagine a world of color and light. She wondered what her own face looked like, or Grandma Esther's gentle smile. She prayed it would be worth the pain. When the anesthesia took hold, she drifted into a dreamless sleep. Hours later, she awoke, her eyes covered with thick gauze. A dull ache pounded behind them, but the doctors assured her the procedure went as planned. Lucas hovered at her bedside. "How do you feel?" Maya tried to speak, but her throat was dry. Finally, she managed, "Like someone drilled into my skull. But, is it done?" He squeezed her hand. "Yes, and they said it went well. You'll need time to heal before they remove the bandages." A swirl of hope and fear churned in her stomach. What if it doesn't work? What if it does? Day by day, she waited, counting the hours, the minutes. Darian remained absent, caught up in his own unraveling empire, but Maya wondered about him, remembering the tortured tone of his voice on that phone call. At last, the day came. A medical team gathered around her bed, carefully snipping away the gauze. Maya's heart thundered as air brushed over her eyelids. "All right, slowly now," the doctor instructed. He helped ease her eyes open. At first, everything was a blur of shapes and muted colors. Then, outlines sharpened. Shadows turned into forms. The corners of her vision brightened, and she could make out a hand. Her own hand. She gasped, tears forming instantly. For the first time in her life, she saw something. The feeling was overwhelming, words slipping away in her astonishment. Lucas stood to her right, smiling. She blinked, focusing on his face. She had no frame of reference for what a face should look like, but she sensed kindness in his eyes. Doctors moved around, checking her vitals, exclaiming in excitement at her progress. And then the door opened. Darian walked in, looking disheveled. His once impeccable suit seemed wrinkled, his expression haggard. Yet in her partially clear vision, he was the most striking sight she had ever beheld. Tall, dark-haired, conflicted eyes. Her chest tightened, and her mind snapped back to that night. She recognized his voice. He was the man at the accident. Terror, betrayal, and fury coursed through her all at once. The world seemed to tilt as Maya focused on Darian, her newly functioning eyes adjusting to the bright hospital lights. Memory fragments from that night surfaced like shards of broken glass. His voice, the roar of the engine, the sickening thud of impact. He was the one who'd hit her and left her to die in the street. Her breathing accelerated, tears burning in her eyes. Lucas noticed her sudden panic. "Maya, are you all right?" he asked, concerned. She didn't answer. Instead, she lifted a trembling finger, pointing at Darian. It was you." Her voice cracked with raw emotion. "You're the driver who left me there." Darian froze. He had planned to confess, but not like this. Shame and guilt washed over him as he met her anguished gaze. "Maya, he stammered, struggling to find words. All at once, the fragile trust she'd harbored for him shattered. She saw now that the man she thought was her rescuer from the shadows was, in reality, the cause of her suffering. She tore off the rest of the bandages, ignoring the doctor's protests. "Get away from me!" she screamed, stumbling out of bed despite the pain. Lucas grabbed her shoulders gently. "Maya, calm down. You're still recovering." But she shrugged him off, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He's a monster," she whispered hoarsely. "He nearly killed me." Darian stood there, stunned and powerless, as nurses rushed in to restrain her. In that moment, the last vestige of his carefully guarded conscience collapsed under the weight of her accusation. He realized that no amount of wealth could repair the damage he had caused. Maya refused to speak to Darian again. She transferred out of the special facility, returning home the moment her doctors declared her stable enough. Although the world was still blurry at times and her eyes ached, she could now navigate visually in addition to relying on touch and hearing. She arrived at the tiny house, only to find Grandma Esther weaker than ever. The cost of medicine had been a burden they couldn't shoulder. Guilt coursed through her, She'd been in the hospital for weeks while her grandmother's condition worsened. In a tense conversation with Lucas, she learned about Damian's downfall. Ethan's machinations had effectively stripped Damian of his company. His accounts were frozen, and he was facing potential arrest. Lucas was surprised Maya didn't show even a shred of sympathy. She clenched her jaw. "He deserves whatever he gets. He left me to die, Lucas. That kind of cruelty can't be forgiven easily." Lucas nodded. "I understand your anger. Still, we need to focus on your future, and Grandma Esther's health." His mention of her future reminded her of the shocking information he discovered, her potential link to Charles Harris, the vanished billionaire. "Lucas, is there any update on that?" she asked hesitantly. "Actually, yes," he replied, pulling out a manila folder. "I've been in contact with old associates of Charles Harris. If you truly are his granddaughter, you stand to inherit whatever remains of his estate, assuming we can prove your lineage." Maya stared at him, her newly awakened vision still adjusting. "How do we do that?" Lucas laid out the plan: DNA tests, possible living relatives, and legal proceedings. "If we succeed, you could be wealthier than Damian ever was." For the first time, a flicker of hope ignited in Maya's heart, hope that she could provide for Grandma Esther and ensure she never had to suffer again. She hardened herself against the memory of Damian's betrayal. If destiny was handing her an opportunity, she wouldn't waste it. Damian stood outside the towering glass doors of Cole Industries, the very building that once displayed his name in gleaming letters. Security guards, who used to salute him, now blocked his entrance. He'd lost everything. His father's legacy, the board's respect, and even Vanessa's shallow devotion. News reports had already circulated about the alleged financial fraud. Paparazzi hounded him for a statement. Stockholders and longtime clients cut ties. The man once considered untouchable now found himself at the mercy of rumors and public scorn. He retreated to his penthouse only to find an eviction notice. With his assets frozen, he couldn't access his accounts to cover his mounting debts. In a single, catastrophic wave, Damian Cole found himself reduced to near penniless. In that moment of despair, he found his thoughts drifting to Maya. Even though she despised him, the memory of her eyes, filled with shock and betrayal, haunted him. He regretted every selfish decision he'd made, but it was too late to undo the damage. When he tried calling Vanessa for help, her phone went straight to voicemail. Later, he received a curt text, "You're toxic right now. Don't contact me." It stung, but deep down he wasn't surprised. She was never there for love, only for status. His entire life, Damian had believed money was the only currency worth anything. Now that he had none, he felt like a phantom of his former self. Sinking into a worn-out chair in his nearly vacant penthouse, he stared out the window at the city lights. Ironically, the same city he once thought he ruled now seemed cold and unforgiving. "Is this my punishment for abandoning Maya that night?" he wondered, burying his face in his hands. Maya stood inside a grand but neglected mansion. Dust coated the antique furniture, and cobwebs dangled from crystal chandeliers. Lucas had arranged a private visit. This property was part of Charles Harris's estate. Old legal records indicated it had been sealed for years, awaiting a rightful heir. Her heart pounded as she walked the empty halls, eyes wide. She paused in front of a massive portrait of a stern-looking man with striking features, Charles Harris himself. She could see a resemblance in the shape of his face, a certain set of the eyes. It was eerie yet comforting, as though finding a piece of her lost heritage. Lucas approached, a set of keys in hand. "The DNA test results came back," he said, voice hushed with excitement. "They confirm you're Charles Harris's granddaughter. His will, once contested, is now valid in your name. Maya, you own this mansion, among other assets." She pressed a hand to her chest, tears forming. "This is too much," she whispered, turning a slow circle to take in the grandeur. "I grew up barely affording food. Now I have all of this." Lucas offered a sympathetic nod. "Life can change in an instant. My suggestion, settle any outstanding legalities, move your grandmother here where she can receive top medical care, and decide how you want to manage the Harris empire. Shaken yet determined, Maya realized this was her chance to rewrite her story. For Grandma Esther, for herself, and for the memory of the mother she never knew. No longer would she be the helpless blind girl who sold baskets on the street. Now, she was an heiress with the power to help others, if she chose to use it. News broke quickly. Maya Harris, formerly anonymous, now revealed as the heir to a billion-dollar fortune, had arrived on the scene. Gossip columns spun tales of a blind orphan turned billionaire overnight. She was thrust into a spotlight she'd never anticipated. But Maya adapted faster than anyone expected. She used her heightened emotional perception in board meetings, easily discerning which partners were genuine and which were trying to exploit her. She hired competent advisors, including Lucas, who guided her through the labyrinth of corporate takeovers and stock buyouts. Her sincerity and intelligence earned her respect. In a matter of weeks, she orchestrated deals that revitalized Harris Enterprises. The media dubbed her the girl who sees without sight, referencing her past blindness. Ironically, though her eyes were still healing, her vision for the company was sharper than ever. Meanwhile, Grandma Esther received the best medical care money could buy. With a private nurse and state-of-the-art treatments, her health improved significantly. One evening, as Maya tucked Grandma into a plush bed in the mansion, the old woman patted her hand. "Child, you've become so strong," she said, tears in her eyes. "I always knew you were destined for great things." Maya swallowed hard. "I owe it all to you, Grandma. Thank you for never giving up on me." Still, in the midst of her meteoric rise, one question lingered. What about Darian Cole? She caught glimpses of headlines about his downfall, rumors that he'd lost his fortune. A part of her felt vindicated. He was paying for his sins. Yet another part couldn't forget the pain and regret she'd sensed in his voice. She tried to ignore it. After all, he was nothing to her now. Or so she told herself. Ethan Cole exulted in his newfound power as the acting head of Cole Industries, which was now on shaky ground but still salvageable. Vanessa clung to his arm, fawning over him in the same way she once did Darian. Their relationship was purely transactional. Ethan enjoyed flaunting his control, while Vanessa liked the material benefits. But Ethan was more cunning than Vanessa anticipated. During a private board meeting, he announced drastic cuts, starting with extravagant expenses. He singled out Vanessa's recent expenditures: designer clothing, lavish parties, personal shopping sprees. Vanessa balked. "Ethan, what are you doing? I'm your partner." He cut her off. "Partner? You were just a convenient ally when I needed to oust Darian." He smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Now that I have the company, you're a liability. You think I'm going to let you spend my money?" Her face blanched as she realized she'd hitched herself to a man even colder than Darian. "Ethan, please," she pleaded. "We can work something out." His eyes flashed with disdain. "Don't beg. It's pathetic." With a snap of his fingers, security escorted her from the building. She was left humiliated, with no real claim to the assets she thought she'd enjoy. That evening, she tried calling Darian, her last resort. But he didn't answer. She had burned that bridge the moment she'd sided with Ethan. Left with nothing, Vanessa found herself reaping the karmic consequences of her greed. Darian scrolled through dozens of missed calls and texts, some from creditors, some from old associates wanting to distance themselves, and one from Vanessa he had zero interest in returning. He was staying in a modest hotel now, using what little liquid funds he had left. Gone were the days of penthouse luxury. He sat on the edge of a hard bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper, feeling a numbing hollowness. A memory of Maya flashed through his mind, the fierce anger in her newly opened eyes, the betrayal and hurt he had caused. He couldn't blame her for loathing him. He stepped out into the chilly night, wandering aimlessly. Eventually, he found himself outside the imposing gates of the Harris mansion. Rumor had it Maya lived here now, having inherited a vast fortune. The lights shining through the windows accentuated the grandeur, a far cry from the meager conditions he was now accustomed to. "Why am I here?" he asked himself, pressing his forehead against the cold metal of the gate. He had no right to ask her for anything. Yet a deep part of him yearned to at least tell her he was sorry. He heard voices approaching, a guard patrolling the grounds. Darian retreated into the shadows, ashamed and anxious. He turned and walked away, realizing he was still the same coward who had driven away that night. If he truly wanted forgiveness, he would need to become a different man, a better man. Maya sat in the Harris mansion study, flanked by Lucas and a small team of advisors. They discussed new investments and possible acquisitions. Unexpectedly, a proposal from Cole Industries came up. The company was faltering under Ethan's questionable leadership. A buyout could be arranged, giving the Harris empire significant expansion. Lucas raised an eyebrow. Buying Cole Industries would place you in direct control of Damian's former company. Are you sure you want to do that? Maya took a deep breath. Memories of lying on the cold, rain-slick street flooded her mind. Damian's betrayal, his guilt, and her own near-death experience. It was a swirl of emotions, but her resolve solidified. Yes, she said firmly. I want to acquire it. By the end of the week, news broke. Maya Harris, the newly revealed billionaire heiress, had purchased a controlling stake in Cole Industries. Ethan Cole was forced out. His employees welcomed the change, hoping for a more ethical leader. During her first walkthrough of the corporate offices, Maya wore a conservative yet elegant outfit, her still sensitive eyes shielded by lightly tinted glasses. Employees parted like the Red Sea, whispering in awe. She felt a strange sense of déjà vu. Once, she'd been powerless in the face of this company's might. Now she owned it. She gathered the senior staff in a conference room. I want to set a new standard for how we treat our employees, she began, her voice carrying a quiet authority. No more ruthless cuts without conscience. We will run a profitable, compassionate enterprise. Anyone who objects is free to leave. Applause erupted, and a wave of respect permeated the room. For Maya, it was more than a business move. It was a statement of her transformation, from blind victim to powerful leader, from street orphan to a queen in the boardroom. Word reached Darian that Maya had taken over Cole Industries. He almost laughed at the irony. A blind girl he'd hit, left for dead, had now saved the very company that had been his family's pride. Swallowing his battered pride, Darian decided to confront his past head-on. He showed up at the Cole Industries building, joining a crowd of former employees looking to reapply or settle disputes. When it was his turn, security almost turned him away. But a curious staff member recognized him. Rumors traveled upstairs. Soon, Maya herself came down, flanked by Lucas and a few managers. She stood before Darian, arms crossed. To her eyes, he looked disheveled, thinner than she remembered. His hair was unkempt, his suit ill-fitted. The once imposing billionaire was now a mere shadow of himself. "Why are you here?" she asked coldly, her heart pounding. Damian's voice trembled with an honesty she'd never heard from him before. "I came to beg for a job." A ripple of shock passed through the small crowd. Maya's jaw clenched. Part of her wanted to mock him, to refuse him outright. But a deeper part recalled how she had once longed for someone to give her a chance. "After everything you did," she said slowly, "you expect me to just hire you?" He bowed his head, face flushing with shame. "I understand I don't deserve forgiveness. But I've lost everything, and I want a chance to rebuild. I promise I'll do better." Lucas glanced at Maya, waiting for her response. She took a moment, replaying the agony of that night, the hospital, the humiliations. Then she remembered her vow. She would use her power to do good, even if it meant dealing with the man who betrayed her. "You'll start at the bottom," she stated. "An entry-level position, whatever HR finds suitable. And don't expect any favors." Damian's eyes glistened. He nodded. "Thank you," he whispered, tears threatening to spill. Maya held her chin high, refusing to soften. "Don't thank me yet. I won't tolerate incompetence or dishonesty." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Darian to realize the depth of her mercy, and how much he would have to prove himself worthy. Rumors spread like wildfire through the company. Darian Cole was working under Maya Harris. Some employees gloated, recalling how he'd once been a tyrannical boss. Others pitied him, seeing a man humbled by fate. During a press conference to announce new initiatives, Maya took the stage in a sleek conference hall. Cameras flashed, journalists aiming microphones. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, especially since rumors hinted at Damian's presence. Then, Maya dropped a bombshell. "Before we proceed with the Q&A, I have someone who needs to speak." She gestured to Damian, who stood off to the side, face pale. He stepped forward under the harsh glare of lights. He gulped, scanning the sea of expectant faces. Maya turned to him, her voice devoid of the warmth she once possessed. "I want you to tell the world what you did to me that night." A hush fell. Damian's lips quivered. His gaze darted to the cameras, to the crowd, to Maya's unyielding stance. Finally, he swallowed and began, voice trembling. I hit Maya with my car in the rain. And I left her there, unconscious. I cared more about my reputation than her life." The crowd gasped. Cameras flashed wildly, capturing every ounce of his confession. Damian continued, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. "I was a coward. My actions were unforgivable. I deserve every misfortune that's come my way. But I'd give anything to change what I did that night." Maya's jaw tightened, but a strange tenderness flickered in her eyes. She had insisted on public humiliation because she believed in karma, in making him face the truth. As he stood there, exposed and broken, she felt a release of the anger she'd carried for so long. Finally, she spoke, her voice resonating with both authority and raw pain. "The world knows now. No more secrets." She stepped away from the podium, her heart pounding. Damian's confession was out, and he had no place to hide. In that vulnerable moment, Maya recognized genuine remorse in his eyes, something that gave her a spark of closure, even if it didn't erase the past. Time passed, and the media frenzy gradually faded. Maya continued to run Harris Enterprises and coal industries with fairness and vision. Damian worked diligently in his new role, showing humility and a willingness to learn. Step by step, he rebuilt a modicum of respect among the employees, none of whom had forgotten his previous tyranny. Maya kept her distance at first, focusing on her responsibilities and caring for Grandma Esther. But one day, she found Damian quietly helping an older employee carry a stack of files, a simple act of kindness that seemed so uncharacteristic of the man she once knew. It made her wonder, could people truly change? Over months, they had occasional conversations, mostly about work. He never overstepped, never asked for forgiveness outright. Yet his actions spoke volumes. He stayed late to mentor younger hires, volunteered for charity events, and gradually formed genuine friendships in the office. Though the pain of the accident still cast a shadow, Maya found her rage dissipating, replaced by an odd mixture of pity and curiosity. She remembered the phone call she'd overheard, Damian's trauma over losing his mother, his desperate desire not to repeat his father's mistakes. One evening, as the office lights dimmed and employees filed out, Maya approached Damian's desk. Papers were spread in front of him, and he glanced up, surprise flashing across his face. "Thank you for helping Ms. Rodriguez earlier," she said, nodding toward the office of an elderly administrative assistant. "She told me you spent hours teaching her how to use the new software." Damian shrugged. "She reminded me a bit of my mother," he said softly. It felt right. They stood in silence for a moment. Finally, Maya cleared her throat, her voice hesitant. "You've changed." She met his gaze, her eyes, once blind, seeing him clearly for who he was. A man shaped by mistakes and regret, but also by the capacity for growth. Damian managed a faint smile. "I hope so. I don't expect forgiveness. But I'm trying every day to be better." A part of Maya's heart that had been tightly sealed began to thaw. Redemption, she realized, wasn't about erasing the past, it was about choosing to move forward despite it. In the months that followed, they slowly built a tentative friendship, one grounded in honesty and second chances. Damian's sincerity, day in and day out, wore down the walls she had erected. He visited Grandma Esther, bringing her flowers and reading aloud to her, forging a bond that even Maya found touching. 2 years later, In a quiet corner of the very hospital where she'd once fought for her life, Maya and Darian were found sitting together, waiting for the results of a routine checkup. "Maya," he said, voice trembling, "these past years have been the hardest of my life, but also the most meaningful. I love you." Not in a superficial way, but the kind of love that grows out of understanding and mutual respect. She looked at him, tears brimming. "I love you too," she whispered, surprising even herself. She had never expected her life to take such a turn, from victim to conqueror, from hatred to love. Yet there he was, a man who had once been her worst nightmare, now her greatest supporter. Their story shocked everyone who knew them, a blind orphan turned billionaire, and a fallen billionaire turned humble, who found a way to heal together. Some called it fate, others called it madness. But to Maya and Darian, it was simply proof that hearts could change, and that sometimes the most painful collisions led to the most profound of destinies. I'm glad you made it to the end. I hope you enjoyed the story. Please go ahead and generously hit that like button and subscribe for more captivating tales like this. We'd love to hear from you. What lessons have you learned from this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next story.